2022 was a fantastic year for gaming. Amidst a bevy of fantastic releases, Elden Ring and God of War Ragnarok rose like two titans, larger than life and mightier than all the rest. Both games are must-plays, well worth the price of admission, but in the end, in the quest for the supreme ruler of 2022, there can be only one. So, who's it gonna be? Elden Ring is FromSoft and Miyazaki's magnum opus. Big Dark Souls, but it's so much more. Elden Ring carries on the well-known Souls formula that FromSoft have spent the last decade and more perfecting, and infuses it with more weapons, more magic, more flexibility and options. It's the most accessible of all the Souls games, but nonetheless lives up to FromSoft's reputation for brutally challenging gameplay and an equally challenging to decipher plot.
The loathsome dung eater.
Why? And then there's the open world. The Lands Between is the first open world design in any FromSoft game. This was the wild card, the element of the game that many Souls fans were unsure of moving into Elden Ring. As FromSoft is well known for its tight, purposeful, intricate level design and interlinking world, and there was some trepidation that the shift to a full open world design would see those amazing aspects of FromSoft design fall away. Luckily, the many legacy dungeons as well as various areas of the overworld itself all tie together and flow smoothly one into the other well enough to fulfill those delicious aha moments of uncovering hidden routes or helpful shortcuts. Moreover, the open world of Elden Ring is brilliantly realized, with a non-linear and exploration-driven progression through the open world map that offers countless tantalizing secrets and surprises, but only to those diligent and observant with a will to explore and discover the land's mysteries and treasures. I cannot emphasize enough how important the open world is to Elden Ring's success. FromSoft, in defiance of genre convention, left the experience of navigating its open world entirely up to the players. The Lands Between are vast, open, and free of markers, objectives, tasks, and chores, and almost every hint of direction or guidance, leaving players free to roam, wander, explore, and discover what this huge world has in store. While this freedom can be daunting for some, for myself and many others, it served only to infuse the sort of wonder of discovery that is felt missing from most modern open world games. Add to the joy of unguided, meaningful discovery the sheer breadth and scope of the Lands Between and its ever-expanding map, and the possibility for exploring is staggering. Every time you think you must have a good portion of the map explored, it expands and expands again and again, until you're looking at a world so much bigger than you expected. On top of this, very little of Elden Ring's open world is empty, useless space. Very nearly all of it is purposeful and intentional, designed with a specific vision, be it gameplay, exploration and discovery, or simple spectacle at the lush imagery and artistic design purposefully laced all throughout the game and its open world. Of the many open game worlds I've experienced, Elden Ring easily takes the top spot. But obviously there's more going on in Elden Ring than just a ginormous world that you can wander and freely explore. Almost every core element that earned Dark Souls a rabid, loyal fan base is on display in Elden Ring. The challenging but engaging gameplay, the variety of stat build and equipment options that you can use to customize your character and play your way, the big bombastic bosses, the gauntlet thrown at players' feet demanding that they rise up to the challenge of getting good. Elden Ring brings all of this and more to the table, along with its patented non-linear storytelling and a soundtrack fit to vibe to as the world crumbles and falls into decay around you. Miyazaki is many things: genius, visionary, rebel, lover of feet, swamp connoisseur. Above everything else, he's a man who likes his themes. We see echoes of the many themes and core concepts that have come in previous Souls games: the corruption of power, the natural decay of a world fading from glory, the cyclical nature of life, and the need to begin anew. Despite his return to these themes, Elden Ring is largely less dark and oppressive than previous Souls games. Okay, mostly less dark, I promise. Elden Ring's biggest accomplishment is just how well it brings all the strong points of FromSoft games and their tried and true game loop of adventuring and god-slaying as you defy tremendous odds and challenges, and blending it all so very well into the impressively implemented open world elements. I went into the game expecting something to be lost in translation in this new open world setting, but if anything, the fierceness and difficulty of combat and gameplay infused into the wide reaches of a world that embraces its scope and hands the wheel over to gamers to navigate their way along at their leisure raise the experience to an entirely new level of excellence. At the end of the day, Elden Ring is indeed big Dark Souls, but with its embracing of player-directed exploration and discovery, its commitment to the tight, refined gameplay, and a constant striving for excellence in its indirect storytelling, character design, and artful presentation of its world, consistently dripping with atmosphere and purposeful, awe-inspiring sights, Elden Ring manages to take that dismissive, belittling assessment and transform it into the highest praise possible.
Tarnished thy strength.
Where Elden Ring continuously impressed us with the breadth of its open world and the sheer scale and scope of its adventures, God of War Ragnarok opted for less surprise and spectacle, and instead leaned firmly into the wealth of strengths that it established in God of War 2018 and pushed all of them up to the next level and beyond. Santa Monica Studios seemed to know that they struck gold with God of War 2018, and rather than needing a drastic change or a pivot in a new direction, fans would be better served by taking what was so beautifully, wonderfully executed in 2018 and adding to it, giving fans more of what they loved and polishing what we wanted into the most vibrant and shining game possible. Following this spirit, we get more of everything that made God of War great. More lands to adventure through, bigger maps, expanded combat options, more enemies, more bosses. There's a larger cast of characters, including all new faces and familiar favorites, more development in the characters themselves and their relationships that form the heart of the narrative and indeed the series as a whole, and more focus on the key moments throughout the game where we see the ways in which our characters are growing, the ways in which they are broken, and the ways in which they continue to seek healing together. There's a focus on cycles, repetitions, and the tumultuous nature of families. The way our best intentions go awry when we lack trust for those we care about. Ragnarok juggles all these relationships and interpersonal drama with slowly rising stakes and balances it perfectly beside an overarching story about the war to end all wars and a gameplay loop that leans heavily into an ever-deepening and evolving combat that runs high on satisfaction with the occasional note of frustration that is easily overlooked in favor of how much fun it delivers. Ragnarok also doesn't neglect the between battle gameplay, giving a wealth of travel experiences, simple puzzles, and a wide variety of unique and memorable environments to explore and experience. Ragnarok expands and improves in almost every metric of gameplay and world building, and adds a deeper pool of variety to its locations, its quests, and its enemy types. Yet for all the added quality quality and depth to these areas and how strong they make the game, the real star of the show continues being the characters, their stories, and the impeccable portrayal in both voice acting and motion capture of each cast member. There are moments with many characters, most noticeably Kratos himself, that are so well delivered, so heartfelt and sincere, that even amongst the backdrop of the high fantasy of the Nine Realms, amidst gods and beasts and myths, with all the battles and blood and fantastical places to explore, I couldn't help but be swept up and transfixed by the performances. The raw and real humanity of so many characters moving through their individual arcs was the heart of Ragnarok and the key ingredient that took a great game and made it something truly special. Ragnarok takes the core story of a father and son struggling to not only survive together, but to build a relationship that matters. One that can hold strong in the face of danger, uncertainty, and change, and expands it into something more complete and meaningful for Kratos and Atreus both, while at the end of all things, still remaining true to that bond that held true through 2 games of challenge and tribulation. Elden Ring and God of War are both titanic games that deserve every bit of their accolade. Yet even titans are imperfect and harbor their own weaknesses and flaws. Much of Elden Ring's imperfections are a double edge to its greatest strengths. The Lands Between are the biggest, most exploration-driven open world design in years and maybe ever. But that player-driven discovery and massive scope come with a certain fatigue as you spend so much time wandering and exploring and discovering with no end in sight. There are more unique and original bosses than any singular game has any right to feature, yet even then the game is so massive that many bosses get reused over and over again until some are well-worn familiar faces by the end of the game. Even the lore is affected by the size of the game, with so much to cover geographically, politically, culturally, and historically, with every place you visit brimming with new details and descriptions of so many items, armor sets, weapons, spells, collectibles, and more that it takes a massive spreadsheet and encyclopedic entry to keep track of everything. And no, I'm not even joking. Vadi himself has shown the spreadsheets that he's using. This is bordering on astrophysics at this point. Real-world history was more simple and straightforward than this. We thought George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire was as complex as history and lore could get for a fictional universe, and only a madman like Miyazaki could come along and match it to this level. These are minor complaints and fairly subjective because some people won't even notice this, but I know it's not just me that walked away from my time with Elden Ring having loved it down to the last moment, but also feeling, for lack of a better words, overfull. It's a classic case of too much of a wonderfully good thing. If open world games were a meal, Elden Ring would be the most decadent, over-the-top Thanksgiving feast you could imagine. It's impossible not to overeat until your stomach is so full you pop a button on your pants. And even though you don't regret a single delicious bite, you're going to suffer from all that bloat. If Elden Ring offers a vast open world with a focus on player-driven, discovery-based experiences, God of War Ragnarok's biggest drawback is being the antithesis of that approach. Don't mistake me, Ragnarok does have a large semi-open world with bigger, more expansive maps in each realm to explore and journey through, finding a wide variety of equipment, collectibles, power-ups, and quests. Unfortunately, while the size of the world is impressive and variety of content enjoyable, Ragnarok suffers from many modern games lean into guiding players through almost every step of its journey, and to an egregious degree.
Look, there's a door just across this gap. Tyr could be right there. Oh, the water's overflowing where you froze that trough. That's helpful.
Maybe you can use those wheels somehow.
I feel a breeze. We might be able to get out of here this way.
The companions you travel with will frequently direct you toward the next point of progression, sometimes with a gentle nudge, and sometimes with a frankly rude push. I can't remember how many times I would be faced with a puzzle or other obstacles to work through, and before I even finished surveying the area or taking in the basics of what I was looking at, Atreus or Freya or somebody else would be pointing to the solution. Oh hey, you should shoot this. Hey, use this type of arrow. Oh look, the lever's right over there, you should go touch it or something. It got to the point that every time I came to a puzzle or some other obstacle that needed an input from me in order to progress, I was less analyzing the environment and coming up with solutions as I was desperately racing the clock for how long I had before some character would interject a solution to a problem I wanted to figure out for myself. It's a little disconcerting when your in-law's son suddenly transforms into a demigod helicopter mom waiting to swoop in to solve all your problems. Ragnarok improves on its quest and boss variety to a tremendous degree, yet it still dips its toes into some repetitious boss reskins by the end of the game that felt like a step back after several steps forward. Likewise, the quests are more varied and meaningful with much more interesting events throughout, but there are still a number of quests that amount to finding spirits to go fetch some random knickknacks for, which was the weakest and most shallow of the quests from God of War 2018. Elden Ring is the most accessible of all FromSoft games by quite a lot, with more options and viable choices for approaches to battle than all of their previous titles. Yet for all that it has a much lower barrier to entry than previous Souls games, the difficulty in the latter phases of the game have such a steep hike in difficulty it can be downright jarring and require a bigger step up in ability than many newer players are going to be ready for. While I'm not one for lowering the difficulty of Souls games and don't personally mind the difficulty of FromSoft trials and challenges, I had to firmly adjust my approach to the latter part of the game and knuckle down to meet the suddenly much more severe difficulty. All of the above said, who takes the crown? Who took gaming supremacy in 2022? Which titan of gaming slew its foe and stands victoriously proclaiming, "I am video game, and you will tremble at my feet as I stand victorious over the gaming landscape, and look at you gaming plebs," and it was Elden Ring. Technically, like statistically, factually speaking, Elden Ring was not only technically Game of the Year for 2022, but it was the most Game of the Year of all Game of the Years. Elden Ring won more Game of the Year awards than any other game in history, clocking in at a whopping 324 Game of the Year nominations. It is the gamiest Game of the Year of all Game of the Years, the supreme gaming being, which is honestly, yeah, it's well deserved. But if you can ignore the weirdly competitive stans who have enmeshed their self-worth with whether their favorite video game is the best of the year for some reason, really, there's no loser here. Call me a milquetoast fence sitter if you want, but honestly, the whole argument of this game should be the game of the year because I really love this game and this other game sucks because I don't like it, it's such a fucking dumb argument. The comparison of Elden Ring versus God of War Ragnarok for which game is actually worthy of being game of the year, it's like comparing the best apple of all time versus the best orange of all time to decide which of them is actually worth eating. Bro, they're both the best of that thing ever. Eat them both. Elden Ring and God of War are different and they excel in different areas, but they're both amazing and you'd be missing out if you passed either of them up. Competition and award results aside, I can only see this as a great thing. It cements 2022 as a legendary year in gaming, where many excellent games are released, and with the top two being so ridiculously good that they set the bar staggeringly high for the years to follow. Whether you're Team Elden Ring, Team Ragnarok, or just Team Video Games, gamers ate good in 2022. If 2023 musters even an attempt at matching the same level of greatness as 2022, this year will be a feast to remember.